According to Statistics South Africa, there are over 7 million HIV positive people in our country. No medical diagnosis is foolproof. Experts say HIV tests are 99.9% accurate, with an almost zero chance of error. HIV positive people can no longer be legally excluded. Strict laws are in place to protect their rights, and HIV treatment has come a long way. But can those who happen to be misdiagnosed take legal action against public and private institutions?
Each and every day I was asking me, how can somebody do something like this? How can somebody list me and say I'm positive, whereas I'm not positive?
I was like crushed. I didn't know where to go or what to do. So my whole world came to a standstill.
In February this year, Special Assignments brought you the stories of two people who believed they deserved justice after being misdiagnosed as HIV positive. In this episode, we follow up with them and ask whether their claims have been able to stand in a South African court of law. Oudtshoorn, a small town in the Karoo. In 1996, a 19-year-old, Georgina Donson, embarked on a career where she could serve her country, the army. Having come from a poor family with few opportunities to find a career, the army was her chance to make it in life.
I used to watch movies where the soldiers help people, and I wanted to do that.
In November the previous year, Georgina had received a letter saying she had been accepted at the South African Army Women's College in George. But before she got there, she had to undergo a physical examination, which she passed. But the dream was about to become a nightmare. She says blood tests were done on her when she arrived at the college, and the following month she says she was singled out for the same procedure.
I didn't ask questions, but because at the time I was still thinking like a child. I was 19 years old. So I just expected, I thought it was the way things are done. And they drew my blood and they labeled my blood and all of that. And the next day they called me again and they told me I was HIV positive and they can't. I'm a danger to the other girls, so I had to go home. You know, it was like, my whole world just crashes right there and then. Because I didn't have a boyfriend at the time. I had a tonsillectomy a few years while I was still in primary school. But it was years back. So maybe the only thing I thought at the time is maybe they gave me blood or I got infected in the hospital. That's the only thing I could have thought about.
For 3 years, she kept her diagnosis a secret.
My health deteriorated because I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I had to go to the clinic and they put me on sleeping pills so I could sleep. But even though I drinking the pills, I couldn't sleep. I was severely depressed. We didn't know what we know today about HIV. So way back it was like it's a plague. If someone knows someone who's got HIV, you're gonna be there and they're gonna be here. So it was like that. I was afraid for that.
Georgina says she felt her life was worthless and thought about going into prostitution. Suicide also crossed her mind, but then she fell pregnant.
When my son was born, when he got his first shot at the clinic, local clinic, he got his fever was so high. I had to take him to the hospital. Then in my mind, it was like now it's the virus. It is attacking my son. And I asked the doctor. I went to the private doctor, and I asked the doctor to test my son for HIV. But he mustn't tell anyone. He must do it quietly. And the doctor came to the hospital after the test and he told me, no, your son is fine, he's HIV negative. And then I told the doctor, how is it possible? I'm HIV positive and my son can't be negative. How is it possible? And I asked the doctor if he wanted to test me. And he tested me, and that's for the first time I found out that I was never HIV positive.
Not believing the results, she says she tested many times after that, and every time the tests came back negative. And so began her journey for compensation for the financial and emotional losses resulting from the misdiagnosis. She wrote to the Minister of Defence, the Premier of the Western Cape, the Public Protector, even called the President's hotline.
We wrote letters to the Human Rights Commission because I really thought maybe they would do something, but in the end they given us hope at first, but in the end they said no, because the South African National Defence Force is investigating your case, we can't investigate as well. Which they are saying my rights as a human wasn't violated.
At that time, the Defence Force's health classification policy excluded people living with HIV from recruitment, external deployment, and promotion, but they have since reviewed their health policy. But would people like Georgina, who claim to have suffered discrimination before the policy change, have any legal recourse? The South African Institute for Medical Research, which is now under the National Health Laboratory Service, had done the test for the Defence Force. In their 2004 explanation about Georgina's misdiagnosis, they said these occurrences were rare, and as optimized as the testing systems are throughout the world, there is still room for error. She says she was then advised to reapply to join the Defence Force, which she did, but received no response. However, Georgina still wanted justice.
Justice firstly means, to me, it means saying we are sorry and compensate me for all the years I've lost, because my best years of my life just went past because of that. So that, for me, that is justice. I want what they must do me right by giving and maybe I can help other people. They must compensate me for what they have done to me.
Nice to meet you.
20 years later, we tracked down people whose paths crossed with Georgina's. The former director of FAMSA, an organization that offers counseling services where Georgina once volunteered, still remembers her story.
She, one day after a training session, or perhaps during the training session, she asked me if she can talk to me. And she told me what happened to her, that she was tested and they say she is HIV positive, and she was very devastated about that.
Her grade 12 teacher described Georgina as a pupil in the top performing class.
She should have been a star for others to follow. She should have been somebody that people should have looked up to and say, you know, she should have been some kind of Woman of the Year thing. And she's not. And it's not her fault. It's because, you know, government or whoever has been dealing with her problem is just totally apathetic. They're indifferent. They don't care.
The former mayor of Oudtshoorn remembers how Georgina sat in his office crying, desperately asking for help.
Oudtshoorn is a very poor town. And if you can't work, you had to live. And I believe in her. This is why I promised her to assist. At the end, actually, and I did write letters. I can't remember how many letters. I know I did write a letter to the MEC of that time, Mr. Piet Meyer.
But to no avail.
So actually, this is one case that I couldn't assist. I tried to help, but I didn't have the success.
If things were different, maybe I would have got into a university. Maybe I would have been have ranked now. Was I still in the army? I would have been an officer that serves my country proudly. So they deprived me from many things, and my life is ruined. I wouldn't have been living in this house. I would have had a comfortable house, providing comfortably for my children.
Months after we first met her, Georgina concedes it's been an uphill struggle trying to get justice.
I've contacted attorneys that I felt maybe could help me get this case to court, but they seems to not. It feels like I've been hitting a brick wall all over again, because no one wants to help me. They say it's been too long and all of that, but I believe in my heart that I can get justice for what has been done to me, because those years I've suffered, I haven't suffered. I really thought I was HIV positive, and I mean I have to get justice for that, and I just need other people to just show them, even if I get nothing, and I have had my fight in court, then I will be satisfied.
As Africa becomes the new business frontier, bursting with opportunity and hope, with its rich natural resources and continental diversity, 11 million managers require development of executive management and business skills to unlock Africa's potential. Mancosa graduates have been driving business, entrepreneurship and innovation in Africa and the world. Mancosa. Dream it. We'll take you there.
An HIV misdiagnosis robbed Georgina Donson of her dream of serving her country in the army. 20 years later, Georgina says that her life is still a bitter struggle. Although unusual, Georgina's story is not rare. Johannesburg-based photographer Rodney Muloisi nearly lost his partner because of a false HIV positive result. It all started in 2006 when, in the process of buying a property, he needed life cover, which required having an HIV test. He says he only received his results 12 months later.
I received a call from Salam, and the gentleman introduced himself. I don't remember his name. He said to me, "Mr. Muloisi, we've got your results, and your policy was declined due to medical reasons. You've been regarded as a high risk, and as a result, we can't give you a policy. So we need to send your medical results to your doctor. So you need to nominate the doctor." And I then nominated the doctor. On my arrival, I was not worried. I was maybe worried, maybe I've got diabetic or I've got high blood, but HIV, I was not worried about, because I knew my status. I did so many tests before.
This would prove to be a false positive result after the laboratory, which had done the original test, offered to rectify the mistake by doing another one, which came back negative.
And then I lost so many clients. I'm self-employed. I lost so many clients. I was not coping at work. I was not coping with a lot of things. I was not delivering my work on time. It affected my whole life, my relationship with my family.
But his troubles were far from over. After giving up on Sanlam, he says he approached another company for life cover.
Within a week, they replied through my financial advisor, and they said to us, "Mr. Muloisi, we have received your application, but your test have came back negative. But there is a problem. You've been listed under a certain code. And this listing means that you are a high risk for the insurance companies, and we can't give you a cover. As a result, so you need to deal with the people who have placed your name on the system, on the database of Assisa." I didn't know who Assisa was. I went back to my financial advisor, then we Googled. I didn't even know that you can be listed for being positive or negative. Yeah. So we Googled and we found out who Assisa was, and we found Assisa, and Assisa, they sent me a form. They requested me to fill up that form, requesting to have my name removed from that system.
Assisa is an association of investors, but that wasn't the only stressor in Rodney's life. He says that his HIV misdiagnosis broke the trust between him and his partner.
Mixed up blindly kube ne singahlaliseki kungabi nokutrustana kahle kahle ukuthi what if uphumile uye kumuntu wakhe, or what if mina ngiphumile ngiye komunye umuntu, you understand? So it created a lot of problems. I don't want to lie.
But it didn't end there.
Yeah, 2012 I tried to commit suicide. Because of the stress besikhona endlini, like bekuna stress endlini, akekho trust omunye, like I said, like, you know, asathembani ukuthi kahle kahle kanti kwenzakalani, you understand? Mina mangiphuma ngemsebenzini uyabheka isikhathi ukuthi okay uphume ngesikhathi so makushaya 5 or 5 o'clock uyachayisa, uyabona sekuwumuntu onjalo o-checka namafoni ini yabo, and iyanginikeza stress. In such a way I drank poison and then tried to commit suicide.
Rodney is pursuing a civil case against Sanlam and Asisa for, amongst other things, defamation for 8 million rand for each company. In its defense, Sanlam says it complies with standard industry underwriting practices. It accepts laboratory test results in good faith, and it denies Rodney's defamation allegations. Asisa says the matter was removed from the court roll following a judgment in November 2012, which upheld the exceptions raised by Sanlam and Asisa to the claims made by Rodney. They deny having a blacklist of consumers who test HIV positive, but admit to having a life register used by long-term insurance companies who are members of Asisa. But Rodney's attorney, Diteko Libete, says the matter was never struck off the roll. There were technicalities that needed to be resolved.
What the court then decided to do was to give Mr. Mloisi leave to amend his documents. Leave to amend, basically, they said, Mr. Mloisi, we hear what Sanlam has said, and we agree with Sanlam and Asisa. But nonetheless, what the court has decided to do is not to strike off his case, but rather to allow him to change his original claim.
Rodney says that there was no official communication to him, but he has since learned that his name has been removed from the list. He now has life cover for a bond through another insurer. But if the decision to put him on the list was correct, why was it then removed from the list? In January, when we first met Rodney, his case was set to sit in the Western Cape High Court in April. He hoped its outcome would set a precedent for similar cases in future, but this hasn't happened.
Currently what is happening, there's been several postponements regarding the case, but I was warned by my legal team that I need to be very patient. The opponent might try to come with technicalities to delay the case. The opponent might try to win this case out of court. I'm very patient, very much patient. It's been 6 years fighting with Sanlam, but all I'm waiting for, or all I want, is just to see my name being cleared. Somebody to take accountability, somebody to take responsibility for this mess.
Jacob Sally from the Center for Human Rights says that often people like Rodney find themselves in a David and Goliath situation.
Number two, the problem is usually that you're fighting against big corporations. You're fighting against people who know they did something wrong many a times, and they're trying to actually cover their own backs, which generally happens. It's not even just in the medical field, but what I would actually advise them to do is that I think there's so many different, first of all, legal NGOs that actually help with medical negligence cases. They are now specialist law firms that actually deal with medical negligence cases.
We make sure to be where news is happening,
both locally and globally. For the latest business news, stay with us.
From South Africa to the world, we've got all your latest sporting news.
Don't miss our weather updates every hour.
Stay tuned to News Today, Monday to Friday, from 3 to 5:30 p.m. here on SABC News.
Between 1996 and 2006, Georgina Donson and Rodney Mloisi, respectively, were both diagnosed falsely as HIV positive. They believe they have a right to seek recourse for the apparent harm to them. But if HIV tests are 99.9% accurate, how does that 0.1% error occur?
But in terms of the actual test, when it's stored properly, when the test is done properly, the tests are very accurate, and the chances of a false positive or a false negative are very, very slim. When you do the test, now the test that we use for diagnosing in the public sector at the moment, we mainly use a rapid test, which is a finger prick test. So you do a finger prick test, that you then have like a little test kit where there's a window where you put the blood into the window. Then you have to add a reagent to that, and then you have to sit and wait for a certain amount of time. So there's quite a few things where it can go wrong. If you didn't get enough blood in, for example, if the test wasn't stored properly, so the test itself has expired and isn't working properly anymore. If you put, for example, we use different types of tests. So if we do a test on somebody, we will confirm it with a second test. That means you've got to have two different types of tests there. So it's easy if you pick up the wrong reagent and put that into the test, then you're not going to get a correct result.
To determine whether there is any legal basis for their claims, we approached attorney Adalvin Volt. She explains that an HIV misdiagnosis may not indicate medical negligence.
If the professional procedure was performed and the protocol indicated that the pathologist did the test accurately in the laboratory, you may sit with an unfavorable end result, meaning a false positive, and a later rerun, whether it's in a month or 3 months' time, and it's still a false positive. It's not to say that that end result being a false positive indicates negligence. It may be in that 2% that I indicated earlier that you may have an inaccurate testing, which is not their negligence.
She stresses that should people have a legal claim to make, they should be cognizant of their rights and the time frame to lodge their claims.
It's important for the patient to be informed. You have to know your rights. If you get a result, an HIV positive result, obtain a second opinion as to what I should do and in what time frame I should do that. And if you are hesitant with regards to your own situation, your own rights, get legal advice within time. Don't wait for 3 years. After 3 years, any possible claim from that moment of your HIV positive statement was given to you will lapse. You don't have a claim thereafter again, so you can't wait for 6 or 10 years.
You can't wait for so long because you also have to look at the evidence perspective, right? It is so hard for you to start looking for evidence 10 years after, because you're not going to start looking for the testing kit that they wrongfully diagnosed you with after 5 years. They've probably been disposed of, and that is then a disclaimer on them to say, listen, you don't even have proof that this happened.
A number of HIV misdiagnoses cases continue to be reported both internationally and locally. Currently, a Durban-based woman is reportedly suing a laboratory for 2 million rand in damages for incorrectly finding her HIV positive. But how big is the problem in South Africa?
It's really difficult to give accurate figures. I mean, for example, in South Africa, you would expect that it's going to happen more often here because of the sheer volume of testing that we do and the number of tests we do. But if you're actually talking about how well the tests work, then if the test is handled properly, as I mentioned, if it's stored properly, then you should get way less than 1% because the tests are more than 99% accurate.
It seems the legal hurdles for these kinds of cases are endless. We approached the Human Rights Commission to find out why they dismissed Georgina's complaints.
We cannot deal with labour matters as an investigator make findings on that as the Labour Court has sole jurisdiction on labour matters. But the tricky thing in that particular matter is the fact that the Employment Equity Act deals specifically with discrimination on the basis of HIV. And as you may know, the South African National Defence Force, as well as our intelligence services, are exempt from the application of the Employment Equity Act. But nonetheless, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have constitutional rights, or can have regard, or can go to the Constitutional Court for appropriate relief. Because fundamentally, such discrimination impacts upon and has every possibility of impairing the human dignity.
But is an incorrect HIV diagnosis a human rights violation?
If you have cancer, for instance, would we say if a person is misdiagnosed of cancer, that person's rights have been violated? Under medical, there would be relief under medical law. However, for such the diagnosis and evidence could be later, the trauma that the person went through, and so forth. But one should not necessarily see testing positive for HIV as an infringement on a person's human dignity. It is the manner in which we as society look at HIV and shouldn't just see it that, yes, it should be a mixed diagnosis for HIV, should necessarily be placed on a different pedestal than any other misdiagnosis. Because we need to move our society forward towards a caring society. And that caring society would presuppose that we treat a positive test for HIV no different than a positive test, even a false positive, for any other disease.
Section 27, an HIV/AIDS advocacy NGO that has for years challenged the exclusion of HIV-positive members from the Defence Force, says that Georgina's dismissal from the army because of her supposed status is not uncommon.
The first case that we got was in 1996, when there were two soldiers whose contracts have been terminated on the basis of being diagnosed with HIV. And because there was no other support that the defense was providing to them, it was also found to be unjustifiable and unreasonable that you can simply terminate somebody else's employment contract because of their HIV status. It was infringing their constitutional right to fair labor practice, their constitutional right to have access to health care, and their constitutional right not to be discriminated against, which the state has a responsibility to use every means, every legislative means possible and available resources to ensure protection of its citizens.
In our first story, we requested an interview with the National Defence Force and were told that our request was receiving attention. This time, we once again requested comments from them, but we are still waiting for a response. After all these years, it seems Georgina's quest for claiming what she believes are her rights may never materialize, and considering that legally the time within which she was supposed to have lodged her claim has lapsed, it's going to be a struggle. But for Rodney, there is still a glimmer of hope as he patiently waits for his day in court.
Water-wise, water